Hi, my name is Barry, and today we're going to talk about 3 topics regarding installing Insul-Quilts. The first topic we're going to discuss is the importance of proper installation. The second is the surface preparation, and lastly, how to install the Insul-Quilt, whether it's for a studio use, a music space, performing center, blog, or home use. Hopefully these tips will make it easier and more effective result in installing our sound blankets. So what is the importance of proper installation of our sound blankets? It's to obtain optimum sound performance and absorption. So how does proper installation affect the quality of sound? I want you to pay attention here because this is a very important piece of the installation technique that will allow you to get the most performance out of our blanket. I have a box here, for example. Let's assume it's a speaker. The speaker's generating 60 decibels of sound, and those 60 decibels are coming out of this 100 square inch hole. If this hole was covered and the speaker's still generating 60 decibels of sound, we will get 50 decibels out of a 10 square inch hole. And if both holes are covered, the 60 decibels will come out of this small 1 inch square hole at 40 decibels of sound. Now that is real critical because what that tells me is even though you're dropping from 100 square inches down to 1 square inch, you're only losing 20 decibels, which means when you're covering walls or ceilings with our blankets or using our blankets, having gaps in the installation is a critical error and you will not get the performance of the sound blanket you wish to have. Additionally, from an aesthetic standpoint, you should try to have the blankets either horizontally or vertically mounted for aesthetics look. Now, it doesn't really matter in terms of sound performance whether you mount them vertically or horizontally, you will have the same effect. Most important is to not have gaps in your installation. So the second topic is surface preparation for installing Insul-Quilts. Whether you're installing the blankets on drywall surface, plaster, concrete, metal, wood, or any other kind of substrate, it's very important that you follow this basic technique of getting started. And that is to use a laser line, chalk line, or string to make sure your blankets are either true vertically mounted or horizontally mounted. You want to chalk the first blanket and then attach the blanket subsequently to that and continue to check to make sure your lines are correct. Now, as far as mounting goes, there's 2 primary ways to mount the blankets. The first way to mount the blanket is we call a direct mount, which you directly mount the blanket against the substrate or the wall with the screws or other hardware attachments. The second way to mount the blanket, which is usually typically used in large studio spaces or production spaces, is what we call a framework mount, where they install a 1x4, a 2x4, or even a metal top hat to install the blankets on. And here we have 24-inch center 2x4s where we mounted the blankets. So you're asking, why is there a difference in mounting and what is the performance difference? The biggest difference is if you have a gap between your blanket, the back of the blanket, and the wall, you will get more bass tone absorption. So if you're in a high performance area, music center, filming studio, you'll get better bass tone absorption. But to the common ear, doing a direct mount, which is a little bit easier and less expensive, will perform just as well except in the real low bass ends. And if you don't want to use the tuck back method, which we have here, we have actually product where we manufacture and we sew the ends, which we call finished ends. It makes a nice clean look to the blanket. The blankets can also be used to take up and put down if you would like to move them around or use them as temporary use. Mounting does not affect necessarily the blanket. It does help more with bass tones if you mount it on a framework system. The third topic we're going to talk about today is how to install the Insul-Quilt blankets. And there's 2 parts of this. One is how to actually install it by adjoining the sides, and the second part is actually securing the blanket to the wall. But first, we're going to talk about the flexibility of field cutting and managing the blankets at your project site. But first, before we do that, I want to make sure we put the right safety gear on as we handle this material and our tools. So I have a small section here of Insul-Quilt blanket. This is the front of the blanket and this is the back of the blanket. We're going to show how easy it is to cut in the field. I have a standard kitchen knife here, sharp knife, and we will just make a V cut in the blanket so you can see how easy it is to field cut a blanket to the size or space that you need. Nice clean cut. It's very simple to deal with. The second way to cut the blanket is actually with a simple scissors, and typically you can cut in two swaths. You cut the top cloth first, and second cut you cut through the aluminum foil, and you have a nice clean cut. Also what that does is it allows you to cut around, for example, outlets or plug-ins, any light switches, any power boxes, security areas, Areas of access, you do not want to cover them with the Insul-Quilt blanket. You want to cut the blanket out and install around access points. The second thing I wanted to mention about the blanket also is that, to remind us, the back of the blanket is actually a radiant barrier, and it keeps heat from coming into the building or this area you're filming in or using, whether it's on the ceiling or the walls. The other side, of course, is all sound insulation or general insulation with an R value of 9. And what that does, it keeps your filming space or studio space cool in the summer and keeps the heat in the winter. So it provides both a radiant barrier and an insulating factor when you mount it on your walls and ceilings. So how do we secure the blanket to the walls? That's what we're going to talk about now. The best way to do that is to actually get an example of a blanket. One of the most important things we discussed earlier is how sound gets through small spaces. And in saying that, we want to make sure when we're mounting the blankets that we join the blankets against one another such that the edges start buckling up just a little bit. And that tells us we have about a 1/2 inch overlap, which is key. We then want to mount the blanket in the center. Okay, and the edge of the blanket is attached, which tells me that we have it close enough and we have no gaps. That's all it takes to mount the blanket. As long as the lines are true and you have the edges touching, overlapping slightly, that's a perfect mount. Also, what we can do is to clean up the device, insulation, you can use a flat black paint. You can cover the washer. When it dries, it'll look like it's part of the blanket itself. We do have a couple of dry washers up here already, which make the finish real nice. You can also use white flat paint as well. So the most important thing again about having the right installation, the right performance is, number one, having a 1-inch washer, and number two is having enough space behind the washer, at least 1 inch, when you screw down the blanket so that we don't crush the blanket and obtain optimum sound performance. Now, the types of hardware that we use in mounting the blankets is variable. Typically, we ask that you use a 2.5 inch screw with a 1-inch washer on the top, and the 1-inch washer is key, which we'll discuss in just a minute. You can also use square washers as long as they're at least 1 inch in diameter, or you can use stick pins if you're working with a ceiling where you can't go with a screw into a substrate. You can actually put the stick pin against the wall with an adhesive, push the blanket over the top of it, and then put an end cap on it to secure the blanket to the wall. So we have screws, stick pins. You can also do shot pins for concrete or any other variable form of attachments. Now, how long will the blankets perform if mounted properly? Well, they will perform as long as the building is still intact, providing you don't get the blanket saturated with moisture or any other kind of wet material. So in summary, what is the most important things about installing Insul-Quilt blankets? Proper installation is no gaps between the blankets to give you optimum sound performance and absorption. Secondly, make sure you draw lines on your structure so you can mount the blankets true, and either decide on direct mounting, which is the mounting blankets here, or on a framework system. And lastly, installing the Insul-Quilt blanket using 1-inch washers minimally, and having at least 1 inch behind the washers between the washer and the wall or the substrate is most important. This is the best way to install Insul-Quilts. Should you have any more questions or comments or want to get more information, please look us up at www.insulquilt.com. Thank you.